Hi, this is Gene Beretta, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it!
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Join Jake and his friends on a journey through pop culture of the past, where they interview professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and so much more. Who will they be chatting with today? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Happy here with us. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm your host, Jake Devenbaugh. With me today are always our co-hosts Chris Bixby and Matt Bingle. How you guys doing?
We're great.
Doing great. Hello, everybody. Glad you're with us once again. How are you, Jake?
Yeah, I'm doing great, Matt, as always. Thank you for asking.
Good. Good. We got a great one for you folks today.
Yes,
Disney creators and
absolutely.
a whole lot more. Chris is going to tell us all about it. Go for it, Chris.
Thank you, Matt. So today's interview is with creative
Yeah.
team Bob Schooley and Mark McCorkle. Bob and Mark, before creating series, wrote for a bunch of animated projects, including the Super Mario Brothers Super Show, Goof Troop, and the TV adaptations of Hercules and Aladdin, and the direct-to-video Aladdin sequels is a little bonus note there. And when they moved on to creating shows, they created Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, but are best known for creating the Disney Channel series Kim Possible and the Nickelodeon series The Penguins of Madagascar. Whole bunch more that we know you will enjoy to hear from Bob and Mark. Enjoy our chat with them. Here it is.
See you then. Hello everyone, welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive.
Yes, we're delighted to have the wonderful Bob Schooley and Mark McCorkle here. Bob and Mark, how are you?
Good.
Great.
Good to see
I'm
you.
Mark.
It's wonderful. So, to,
We're both here.
to kick this off, could you tell our audience a bit about yourselves and what you do?
Well,
Sure. Bob, you want to start with how we met?
well, we've been producing animation for 30 years, I guess.
Heaven help us.
Yeah, we started out at a studio called Deke that no longer exists, but did shows we wrote for like Super Mario Brothers and Real Ghostbusters and a lot. I'm trying to think of Swamp Thing. That was one.
Yes, yes.
Our first series was called Cops. But in 1990, we went to Disney. Mark can take it from there.
Well, we were recruited by Disney right when they were getting big. They had done a few Saturday morning shows, Winnie the Pooh, Wuzzles, and Gummy Bears, and they had DuckTales, which had been huge. But the Disney Saturday or Disney Afternoon was about to get really big. So they were staffing up with a bunch of writers. So we came on, we worked on Goof Troop, and then we worked on Bonkers and Aladdin, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, Hercules, and eventually created Kim Possible. And then also worked on Big Hero 6, the series, more recently.
Penguins
So
of
yeah, it's been
Nickelodeon.
in between we went to Nickelodeon and did Penguins of Madagascar, and that was fun. But it was a good, it's been a fun career. But originally we met back in Pennsylvania at Sesame Place, which is a Sesame Street themed theme park.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
And we both worked there. And I think, it's funny. I think it was the closest to an entertainment job that we could get in our little hometown, short of, I guess, working at a movie theater or something. Like this was sort of the closest thing because it had Muppets and, Jim Henson did famously visit at least once, where we saw him. So, that was sort of an exciting inroads. And I think when we met, we became friends socially, but also we realized we had this common interest. And that led to us saying, maybe we should try to write for a living.
Nice, nice.
That's great. So, what was your both childhoods like, and how did you grow up?
Well, we both grew up in Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia. Um, my father worked for a TV station in Philadelphia, so my childhood was spent going in with him to work as much as I could just to watch and soak it up. And that sort of got me interested in that business. Back then, local TV had kid shows, which they really don't anymore. So I would hang out at these kid shows, and that was all I wanted to do, and sort of pointed my way toward that then.
Yeah, I think I grew up with the kind of appetites that most nerds have of comic books and The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings and just all that, consuming all that stuff. Uh, and I think just the other day I was talking to some fellow writers about this. I think there was that magical time in the 80s where between Ghostbusters and Goonies, there were all these movies that I think set a lot of us with a love for that sort of comedy adventure, um, which we all ended up trying to write. I think like all the guys uh, who we knew who worked on Disney afternoon shows like Darkwing Duck, or when we worked on Aladdin. It was all that balance of comedy and adventure that I think really did form with the movies we were watching in the 80s. So it was sort of interesting to look back now and sort of see that lineage. At the time, I don't think we thought of it that way. I think at the time we just thought, we're telling these sort of cool original stories. And I think now looking back, it's like, oh no, we were definitely, products. Yeah.
Nice.
Absolutely. So, Bob, I feel you kind of answered it already, but I'll ask you and Mark anyway. Did you always want to work in television as careers?
Yeah, I answered. Mark, I think.
Well, I think so. I think we were a generation that grew up with television. I mean, I think, uh, but as much as television was all around us, and like Bob said, Philadelphia was a unique television market where there were quite a few kids shows. They tended to be, weekday morning, and then as that shrunk, it became just, came down to like maybe one or two, like a Saturday morning one. And then there was that weird thing of, as a kid, you were desperate to you'd find the stray syndicated show or whatever, but it really was Saturday morning was sort of that magical time. So it's funny to me now to think about our kids were between cable and now with streaming, I mean, cable certainly through the 90s and now in the age of streaming, where they can kind of watch their chosen entertainment anytime they want is pretty amazing to me, because we had to like,
there isn't such thing as kid shows with live action hosts or anything anymore when you think about it.
No.
Right.
Well, and even something like
Pee-wee was kind of the last gasp of that in a lot of ways.
and even that was sort of a meta version of it. But when I think back, my kids, who are now in their 20s are sick of me saying this every year. But whenever we put in the Blu-ray of like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer or Charlie Brown Christmas, I have to do my old man rant about, you don't understand what it was like.
You can only see this once a year.
This only came on once a year. And when it came on, God forbid your parents were like, we're going to go to the grocery store. Everybody get in the car. So, you know what I mean? Like, if there was no taping it, there was no streaming it on, when you choose, it was, that thing's on at 8 tonight on CBS, Rudolph, I got to watch it, So it really, we did consume entertainment in a different way. And I don't know if in a weird way that made us more driven when we chose to try to create for a living or not. Because in a weird way now, with so much at their disposal, kids also have more technology at their disposal to create stuff at home. Like Bob has always been more technologically advanced than I am, like the anti-machine person. But together, if we had computer editing and stuff, man, our parents never would have, had a second with us. We would have been like creating stuff. Like what kids can now do at home, to me, is pretty remarkable. I mean, we did
Right,
stuff with Super 8 movies and, that kind of stuff, but
right,
it's interesting.
absolutely.
Nice. So your careers in television started in the sound department on various series. Can you kind of like talk about your work in that field?
Well, I think our very first job was working as just runners, which is just meant you would drive around. So in this dropping off, sometimes a single document.
Yeah.
Sometimes we would drive from the Valley to Century City or Beverly Hills to drop off a
Era
document.
before you could email things.
So
Right,
it,
yeah.
it was it was in essence the mailroom. It was like sort of this sort of holdover from like the 1950s and 60s or whatever, still happening in the 80s. And
The
then
sound department, the sound department credit that's on our IMDb though is a little misleading in that we both worked in the casting department at Deke,
yeah, we
which
were
meant
recording assistants, which meant we worked at sessions. Uh,
Interesting.
where that influenced us was being at recording sessions, we got to observe voice actors in action, which was a real education for us as writers. Because you got to hear what lines worked, what lines didn't, but also you just got to see the energy that an actor brings, to the process.
Right,
And you also got to watch directors in action to see how they do it. You got a glimpse. We didn't really work much in the production side of things. Bob, you did briefly, but not much.
yeah,
Most of what we did was casting, and then we made the jump to writing. But it was a way to get a feel for how they keep the machine moving forward.
right,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Like sometimes creative
right.
people and actors, you could get together and just try all kinds of things and ignore the clock and maybe not get through the whole script. And that's where a director is keeping their eye on the clock. They're creatively trying to achieve something, but they're also know they have to get through the whole script in that session. There was a real, I think we benefited by having some great people we could watch and learn from.
Absolutely.
and that
Exactly.
job was interesting because
Abs-
you're the one sitting there with a script in front of you, keeping track of all the takes. So it really gave you a feel for looking at that line in print and hearing it out loud at the same time, which as a writer is a really good thing to have.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And of course, IMDb would be misleading. We're no strangers to
Well, I
that
mean,
around
the
here.
term recording assistant sounds like a fairly technical job, but it really had more to do with the casting department. That was just sort of the official title they gave entry level people. Eventually, we moved up, I think, to talent coordinator, which
Still,
meant
I
we
still
helped
think that's
schedule.
considered recording job.
Yeah,
I mean, IMDb, when we did the Hercules series, we had a million celebrities on it, but IMDb added a lot more. Like the
yeah. There was
accuracy,
like some weird wish casting where
yeah,
people
the accuracy
had
level of
some
some of the
stuff of like
IMDb stuff is not.
Mm.
where we're like, no, we had a lot of people, but
Yeah, we had
not that
hundreds of
one.
celebrities, but they listed many more that we did not have and made up roles for them. And I think it's still on there that way because it's
I assume
really
that was just sort of fan submitted or
it's
something.
hard to get
But
IMDb to change something once it's up, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now, as writers, you wrote several episodes of the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. What was
yes,
that like?
it
It
was
was
great.
fun because it was silly. I mean, that era, you would do 65 episodes of a show in like half a year or something. It was crazy how many scripts got pumped out. So it let you sort of learn. In a lot of ways, it's like when, movie writers talk about the golden age of television or something. There was just so much stuff being made
Yeah,
that
the
it
sheer
allowed.
volume was so much, that when the sheer volume is that much, it gives new people opportunities. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
The system has to be fed scripts, and to get the right number of scripts, yeah, you're going to have some experienced people, but to really feed the beast, there are times you're going to let somebody new, which is what we were at the time. And we got lucky that our first couple clicked. So, if your stuff clicks, then the story editor who's working with your stuff is going to go back to you because it makes their job easier. That was the other thing we learned, that creatively people are interested in making stuff, but they're also interested in meeting deadlines and getting through it
Yeah.
all. So if you have to get 3 scripts or 4 scripts final in a week, and you have hit upon a couple guys who have stuff that goes through pretty quickly, you're going to keep going to them. And we benefited from that.
And on that show, it was definitely, if you can come up with a stupid pun title or something, you were good to go. I think Provolone
Yes.
Ranger, we sold it on the title. It was
Yes.
like,
And we had fun. I mean, look, Mario and all those Nintendo characters were sweeping the culture, so that was a
Oh,
really
yeah.
fun thing to dive into.
Yeah, I remember watching that series, back when. But I mean, it's been a while. I mean, whenever we watch
I don't know
them,
that
I'm
it
sure
holds
I'll
up
remember
exactly.
them.
When you compare it to the Mario movie now, that looks
Well, every
gorgeous.
now and then my kids will
Yeah.
dig it up. We'll find it on streaming or whatever, or on
Right.
YouTube and play it. And it's pretty amazing. The production quality, again, it's hard. People can't sort of understate how much, when Disney got into television and when Warner Brothers got into television with Tiny Toons and with Batman,
Oh,
the
yeah.
animated series,
Yeah.
the quality of television animation really took, a big leap forward.
Was the Hanna-Barbera era and filmation was really about how cheap can you do it and how few cells can you do.
They were just limited, yeah, and there was like a budgetary constraints that were sort of set, and no one was going to push that. And I think Disney and Warner's made a
they
strategic
had a
decision
legacy
to
that
push
they were
it.
trying to, they were trying to respect their legacy as much as they could on a TV schedule. And so they really pushed the studios who did that animation to sort of go further than they had at that point for American animation, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Definitely. So now, as we talked about a little bit earlier, before you kind of got to create for Disney, you worked on the shows Goof Troop and, of course, the
Mhm.
TV adaptations of Hercules and Aladdin.
Mhm.
What was kind of that aspect like of actually getting to write for Disney before, creating for them?
It was, I mean, those characters, the beauty of, whether it's Goofy, which is such an indelible character
Oh,
with
yeah.
decades of history, or Aladdin was interesting because we got to see the movie at various stages before it was done. So, because they knew at that point they wanted a series even before the movie came out. So it was really interesting to be able to watch the movie in progress and then start writing the show before the movie had actually come out and you weren't sure whether it was going to be a hit or not. So it's a big relief when the movie was a giant hit. But it's always great. The great thing about doing movie spin-offs is they're characters that have been worked to death in the movies to really make them shine. The bad thing is the animation in those movies at that era was so spectacular that trying to sort of replicate that at television was never going to exactly, satisfy.
Yeah.
But
You were always going to be inferior from a visual standpoint to a Disney feature of all things.
Right.
I mean, the good thing about Aladdin is we did all those episodes and we did Return of Jafar, and then our last thing we got to do with it was the King of Thieves, which Robin Williams came back to do. So certainly a career highlight was getting to work with Robin Williams and watch him.
Oh, I'm sure.
And once he came back, Bob and I got to work with him on Genie's Great Minds Think for Themselves. There was a sort of initiative at Disney to say, hey, look, if we've got Disney, we own ABC, we have ABC Saturday Morning. Why aren't we doing something new that's going to stand the test of time, like a Schoolhouse Rock or whatever? And we pitched the idea of using Genie to talk about historical figures. And that was a great collaboration with Robin, where we wrote very bare bones sort of scripts to say, okay, Sojourner Truth or Benjamin Franklin, here's a framework with some ideas of what you might transform into or what voices you might do. But he would just do you know,
Plug and take.
yeah, it was like hours of
When we did
material.
King of Thieves, we recorded him for an entire week in San Francisco. So we spent, I think, like 4 hours a day with him, just
Yeah,
riffing. It was great.
it was a wonderful experience.
That's awesome. That's wonderful. So now moving on to the series you created, you both created the Toy Story spin-off series Buzz Lightyear of Star Command. Can you kind of
Yes.
talk about how that came about and, I guess similar to what we just talked about, what it was like writing for a series based on such an iconic film?
Well, Buzz, was so popular coming out of the original Toy Story. And while we were doing the series, they were working on Toy Story 2. Um, I think we thought we'd be off the hook a little bit for the comparisons because we were going to do the sort of the 2D show that the Buzz toy came from. That was sort of the meta idea that the crew was creatively pursuing. That if in essence, it was the syndicated sort of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe show that Andy would have watched that would lead him to want a He-Man toy. Do you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
our thing was, let's create this. All we had was Buzz, and Evil Emperor Zurg has these plans. So based on that, we worked with Tad Stones, who had done.
Oh yeah, I
I mean,
love Tad. He's a previous guest too. Love him.
yeah, he had done Rescue Rangers. He was involved from a TVA from the beginning.
Yeah, yeah, it's great.
He came from feature animation, and he was involved with, to some extent, DuckTales, but largely Rescue Rangers. Darkwing Duck was his baby, and we worked with him on Aladdin. And there was a lot of the same Aladdin folks had made that transition to Buzz, and our basic conceit was, okay, this is the show Andy would rush home from school to watch, or watch on a Saturday morning. And then we just populated it with other Rangers, the little green men from the Claw Machine were so popular in the movies. We figured out a way to utilize them.
Funny when they did the Lightyear movie a few years ago that it was sort of the same idea that
Yeah.
this is the movie that Andy would have watched. And it was funny for us to watch that because it was like a lot of press where it was like, well, that's confusing. And it's like, well, we did it with the series. I didn't think it was that confusing that a toy would be spun off of a different thing.
Yeah,
I think it was
Right.
actually a little more confusing when it was the movie because it still
it was
looked
all CG.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
this was a
But
traditional sellout.
but we had fun. It was a great chance to play in that sort of science fiction space opera sandbox, and like I said, it was a lot of the folks that Tad worked with on Darkwing, and also it was fun. A lot of the
We had
Aladdin
done,
crew.
and previous to that, we had done for ABC right after Toy Story came out, these little things called Toy Story treats that I
Oh
think are
yeah.
on
Mhm.
Right.
They're on one of
Okay.
the DVD box sets.
yeah, and that was
Yeah.
fun because we got to go up to Pixar really when Pixar was a new thing practically. I think they were working on Bugs Life at the time
Yes,
and work with John Lasseter and got to see
Jeff
Steve
Pigeon and some other people.
Jobs
Little
pop in
shorts.
John Lasseter's office when we were sitting in there.
Yeah,
But
I guess Glenn McQueen, a director up there,
yeah, Glenn McQueen, who has since
was
passed away, sadly, he was a fantastic director they
yeah,
had.
he was
Right.
sort of a key guy on those. So we did stuff with the Army Men and stuff with sort of the key
Buzz and,
toys, Buzz and Woody, and it was fun.
um,
Nice.
That's great. So now, you both are best known for creating a long-running Disney Channel series, Kim Possible. How do you
Yes.
both kind of first approach to create what would become, such an iconic show?
Well, it's funny because we were just recalling this the other day that, had this great success in the syndicated market, which is where kids were during the 90s. But heading into the 2000s, kids entertainment had this big shift with Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and Disney Channel becoming sort of the new destination. And the crazy thing was, in all the years of Walt Disney Television Animation, they had never done something for Disney Channel. So here were these two very big divisions, successful divisions of the Walt Disney Company that had never really collaborated. So the decision was made that they should collaborate. And we were kind of given the assignment of, can you come up with some stuff to pitch to them that would be good for them? And all at the time, what we knew about them was that their audience skewed more female than male. And then, you know, the famous story, and it's famous only because it's crazy but true. We were coming back from lunch one day and we're in the elevator, and I turned to Bob and I said, Kim Possible, she can do anything.
I said, Ron Stoppable, he can't. And
that's our development was like done.
Yeah.
Like in that moment, we had these two names and these two sort of defining characteristics. And then everything else just sort of fell into place. It was the easiest development.
I mean, our theory of the show at the time was, for boys, there was James Bond and James T. Kirk and Jim Rockford. There's a lot of Jims. Jim Rockford.
Everybody was named Jim. James West.
And those kind of characters were, they really could kind of do anything. You just sort of bought that they were ultra competent and always won. And, you know, we said, what if you could do that with a teen girl? Because we both had daughters. And then, you know, the Ron idea just came from, all right, she needs kind of a foil comedic sidekick. And, you know, and then we sort of reversed that with Draken and Shigo, that, you know, Shigo is kind of the competent one, and Draken is, even though he's the lead, he really is the comedic sidekick to her in a lot of ways.
Right.
And really the show came together very quickly. The only thing that kind of in development got added that was major was they asked for a pet. And I had seen naked mole rats at the Philadelphia Zoo and saw how fascinated kids were with them. And that's when we were like dying to get a naked mole rat in something. So when they said add a pet, it's like, aha, naked mole rat. They won't expect that. And they didn't. But it was, it
was great. It was a very easy development. And, you know, Chris Bailey was our collaborator. And, you know, he grew up with a lot of the same stuff we grew up with, comics, and, you know, he had this love of like Johnny Quest and that kind of, he had just worked on the Clerks animated series. So he had kind of a creative art team already kind of assembled, many of whom joined the Kim effort.
Clerks only 6 episodes was to our benefit because we had a really good team.
We got Steve Silver, the character designer, Al Bodner, art director. And, you know, ultimately then with Kim, the sort of shared mission and vision was, you know, the action is going to be cool. We're going to make sure it's always a 50-50 split between the ordinary world, high school stuff, and the action world, so that you're never you're never in one world too much. It's always 50-50, which gave it every show this sort of hopscotch rhythm that worked very well for pacing. We made sure the action was great. We made sure the comedy was there. And then lo and behold, when they tested it, yes, girls liked the idea that there was a heroine saving the day and at the center of it all. But boys liked the show too. They liked the action.
Oh yeah.
They thought Ron was funny.
Right.
Rufus was funny.
The villains were, you know.
The villains were comedic but dangerous, you know, which kind of goes back to what I said before, like in a weird way, you know, we felt like, oh, we're writing Kim Possible. But when I look back now, I kind of see, there's a lot of that first Ghostbusters that is in sort of an ancestor to everything we did afterwards.
Well, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Buffy at the time. It was definitely a zeitgeist show too. I mean, I think Powerpuff Girls was out around the same time. So you had people putting girls in the lead of an action show, but keeping comedy there, but making sure the action's well executed and cool.
Right. Yeah, Kim Possible is a wonderful show, huge part of my childhood. And I'm currently, you know, binge watching it on Disney Plus.
Oh, good. Keep going. Keep binging.
Yeah.
Maybe
the latest episode I left.
Do more.
Yeah, the latest, I know we're going to talk about episodes in a moment, but the latest
Huh?
episode that I left off on was the episode where Ron's like zapped into this like video game world.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
that
Yeah.
was Steve Loader directed that one, and that was sort of a pet project for him, I think, coming up with a different look for the video game world and all that.
Yeah,
Very cool.
absolutely.
Absolutely. So, on the subject of episodes, perfect transition there, Chris. This may be a little bit difficult, but are there any episodes that stick out to you, some of your favorites?
I think the one where Kim and Shigo kind of switch roles. What was that? I forget the name of it now. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I mean, I always think tend to focus more on the season one episode just because that's where we were finding the show.
Mhm.
Right,
So
yeah.
to me, Crush was always a great one because that's the one we
Hmm.
focus tested. We focus tested a slightly shorter version
I
that I
don't think
think did not
Shigo
even
was
have
in it.
Shigo in
Yeah, it
it.
didn't have Shigo
It
in
was
it. It
just
was
Draken,
Draco,
stealing, the
laser
drill.
drill or whatever.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah,
but
that's the one where we definitely found the characters.
the other
There was an
early
odd
one,
showing that we kind of started it without explaining why any of this was happening.
yeah, we just hit the
We
ground
sort of
running,
jumped
and
into it. And then later we kind of did backstory episodes. I think one of my favorites is definitely the three-parter that was past, present, and future, sort of dealing with
yeah, the
just
time travel three-parter was great. The other
interest.
early one I have a soft spot for, maybe because it's a little bit Ron-centric, is Monkey Fist because
Oh yeah,
it
yeah.
was one of the first ones where, from a plotting point of view, we hit upon a really amazing twist, where there's a point where Ron's in danger at Monkey Fist Castle and he's got a holographic Kim with him because Wade wanted to try it out and he has no idea it's not the real Kim. And that was sort of the cliffhanger for one of the commercial breaks was for the audience and for Kim, this revealed that Ron has gone into this incredibly dangerous situation without her. And he has no idea she's not there. It was like, well, that was a good twist. How did we come up with that? Um, so I think a lot of and then, by the time we got to season 2 and 3, then we could do the stuff of like, yeah, Kim and Shigo sort of swapping roles or them finding commonality, that's the kind of stuff if we did it too early, I think it wouldn't have been good. I think it was great to earn it along the
I mean,
way.
kind of the nice thing about the way that series worked for us, because I think it went on for 7 years, is it just sort of evolved
Yeah.
naturally. We didn't really sit down. Although from the very beginning, the assumption was Kim and Ron would end up together at the end.
Right.
What kind of
We
what
never
kind of
wanted to do, we didn't want to do there's the will they, won't they shipping thing. We knew we wanted to play that out over the course of the series. And I think we always imagined either it's never shown in the series, them getting together, or them getting together is a finale, which is what we ultimately hit on. That we
yeah,
did
in
an
the movie
animated
time
decom,
there.
Kim Possible Soga drama, where they ended up together, they kiss at the prom, and it was like, great. We've told the last story. We don't have to do stories where they're a couple.
Hmm.
And
Right.
and then we
And they picked up a
unexpectedly got
fourth
picked
season.
up for a fourth season. So then we did actually do, but I will say the writing team, the writing staff at that point stepped up and told some very funny Kim and Ron dating stories. So I think,
But it
then we had to
was
build to graduation, which in some way graduation was a
Oh
great
yeah, graduation,
finale.
yeah.
Yeah.
It was
Right.
fun. It never quite had the same impact as them getting together at the prom for me anyway.
well, just because that was a movie and it was
It was more emotional, I thought.
and the interesting thing was that movie initially was written as a live action movie for features. And then we kind of defeated ourselves in that we were also brought on to Sky High to rewrite that. And when that got the green light to go, they decided not to do a Kim Possible live action movie. So
Yeah, they were kind of in the same, a little bit in the same genre and probably the same budget range. So I think when Sky High went, Kim kind of took a a backseat in the live action world there at Walt
Yeah.
Disney Pictures. But we had that script sitting around, and we are like, well, we wrote this script, and it didn't require many changes. A
No, it was
few.
you, but yeah, it was actually relatively easy to adapt it.
There was something about the discovery, I think, in season one, discovery of what the show is, but also just creatively the team discovering what the show is, like visually, and the storyboard artists in terms of what's of doing the action and comedy required such different skills. It was a challenging show, I think, in that regard.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Right.
So
I love the where the characters for that series, and then like from the Lego Stitch series got to do kind of like a crossover.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
That
the
was
yeah.
pretty
crossover.
cool.
yeah.
was
Yeah.
yeah, I think they
Always
did.
cool when stuff like that
They
happens.
did Us, Proud Family, The Recess Kids.
Oh wow.
And I
Uh,
think American
Yeah,
yeah,
I
Dragon.
mean that was
American Yes, I
Yeah.
yeah,
think so. I
American
Yeah.
think you're right.
Dragon.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
we actually had nothing to do with that. That was
Right.
Yeah, I
all
think
the
they just sort
legal
of
and
asked
Stitch
us,
people. Um,
our opinion maybe or something. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think that, well, then that's what's interesting. What leads to these things sometimes is, uh, I mean, really going back again with Walt Disney TV animation, when Eisner and Katzenberg came in and Disney and they rejuvenated Disney feature animation with Little Mermaid and all. One of the questions they were asking was, if Disney is synonymous with animation, why aren't we in this? What are we doing in the TV business? Like, why aren't we dominating that? And that kind of led to DuckTales
Right.
and led to all that. And, stuff like, I think Eisner was the one who pushed things like the Aladdin TV series of like, look, if you've got this IP that is successful, I think at the time making animated sequels was not all that. I mean, I guess Rescuers had Rescuers Down Under, but
yeah, I mean it was
uh,
really when we did Return of Jafar, that was supposed to be at the time those Disney afternoon shows would often begin with like a 5-part first episode because they did 65 episodes.
it would,
So
yeah, often be like an event around September or late August, back to school season. There'd be like the event that kicks off DuckTales or Rescue Rangers or Darkwing.
it was
And
really Tad's idea with the Aladdin, what essentially was the first few episodes, showed that to Jeffrey Katzenberg, and um, his reaction was, we should release this on video, which, you know, became just a huge moneymaker
it became its own business,
on
you
that
know.
whole direct-to-video business. It doesn't exist anymore, but for a while there, for better or worse, they were making a lot of money on those things.
Yeah.
But it was originally just intended just to sort of kick off the series, but became this other thing.
Right. Right. So now, Kim Possible's success led to two TV films, Stitch in Time, as you mentioned earlier, and
Yes.
so the drama. How did it feel to you both that your creation, got its own, films?
It was great. It was a good, it was great to, I think the time travel one, because it had its built-in 3 parts, I think was a little more manageable. Like it felt like each one's going to be a standalone when that part
I think
airs.
it aired as a movie initially, and then it was
Yeah.
cut into 3.
But I think we kind of conceived it and executed it
Yeah.
that the 3 parts would be satisfying. So I think that was a good transition to, whereas the drama was definitely, let's try to tell a long form cohesive story that in a
And
way, if you broke that one up, it wouldn't be, each part would
I
not
don't
be
know,
as
did that one
satisfying.
ever break up, or I think it's
I
always
don't
been.
think so. I think it's
Yeah.
always been long form. I mean, maybe
But,
somebody somewhere broke it up.
yeah, but Stitch in Time was definitely 3 episodes that could work together as a movie.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was a good feeling. I think it's good. You know, it's a challenge to launch a new show and tell the 22s successfully and, feel like you did it. And then to go into the longer form is its own challenge, and to feel like you did that is a good feeling. And it's nice that both long form things succeeded with the audience. That's always the fear is, okay, people were happy with these as 22-minute episodes, but do they really want a whole feature film of Kim, Ron, and
Hey, the
Rufus?
really challenging thing was doing we had to do some episodes that were 11-minute episodes.
Yes.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was harder, and I think probably, in retrospect, less successful, just because the structure of a typical episode was so much half and half of here's Kim in school and home, and here's Kim in action mode. And that was kind of harder to
Yeah.
do.
The 11s became much more drop our guys into a situation and milk the comedy and danger in that situation and then resolve it. So
I
even
think some
to me,
worked well, some worked better than others.
one of the most successful ones was Attack of the 50-Foot Rufus,
Oh yeah, yeah.
where Rufus, Commodore Puddles, Draken's poodle, and Rufus both get giant size. And we have our sort of Godzilla Kong fight. It was just a silly romp, but there was not any of the usual emotional stuff of Kim at school or Ron with an emotional issue or whatever. It was definitely, let's just pick, a genre, in that case, the sort of B monster movie giant creature
Right.
thing, and have fun in that genre. It seemed creatively to us, they were well executed episodes, but I don't think creatively they weren't quite the series, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm
Right.
not sure they show up on anybody's favorites list exactly, but
Right. So now is it because I remember looking up, isn't it true that is it true that after that at the time Kim Possible was only supposed to have 3 seasons, but because of how popular it was and there was like a petition or something to get the show renewed?
yeah, it was about back then 65 episodes was just sort of a standard animation order, not just at Disney, kind of everywhere.
It just made economic sense. Like that's enough to rerun.
It's like you can do 5 episodes a week for 13 weeks was
Yeah.
basically the pattern. But ironically, it wasn't really the petition that got us a fourth season. I think there was another show in development that fell apart, and they had a production pipeline that needed to be filled.
Don't tell the petition people.
Yeah,
that.
well,
They worked very hard. They all
in their
signed.
40s now. I think they can handle the truth.
No, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt
No,
to
I mean,
have a big concerted fan effort to say we'd love to see more of this show. But it did turn out
it was the show was still popular enough that it was a pretty easy decision
that suddenly they were like, we need to make a show. We need a new show. The show we thought we were going to make is not going to happen. And in all honesty, I don't even remember what that show was. But
I don't know that we knew at the time. I think
maybe we didn't ever know.
We were just because development.
It was just like that show's not happening. We need you guys to make more Kim. And that's when we said, okay, well, I guess it'll be high school. They're dating, we're going to do those stories we never thought we would do, but I guess we're going to do them.
We were lucky, I think, that the crew was still around to do those, because I think the decision was probably made. It's hard for me to remember now, but I think that decision was made pretty shortly after we finished the drama.
Yes.
So it kind of just went right into it.
Yeah, there might have been a little break. I don't know.
But
yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting to feel like, okay, we've done it. We're done. Time for the next thing. And then to suddenly go, nope, you're going to do more. It's like, but also I think that goes to the other big thing we've talked about earlier, which is the way the kids entertainment business changed. That syndication model, that number of 65, that magic number, was a very important thing about a syndication package. As that went away and we shifted to the cable landscape, you have shows like SpongeBob and Teen Titans Go. I don't even know how many they're up to now. I think they're going to head towards 500 or something crazy. Like,
yeah, I mean,
and SpongeBob. So the cable landscape became its own thing, where those old models of economically, does it make sense to just stop at a certain point? Well, not necessarily, because you need your hit. If you have new episodes of your hit, then you can launch a new show with it to try to build your next hit. And streaming is now its own thing where I don't think people even quite know what's the magic number for streaming, other than the numbers seem to be getting smaller. Season orders tend to be, we've heard 10, we've heard 8, in some cases we've heard numbers as low as 4, which is a lot of pressure on a show to find an audience.
Yeah, I mean, the business has just changed tremendously.
I mean, the typical Kim season 1 was what, 21 episodes or 22?
Each season was
like
a different length. I think
season two was like 30 half hours,
and 13,
which was large.
Yeah, it was. We got up to what, like 84 episodes or something
like that.
But
yeah, now a
kind
typical season, if you get 10 half hours, that's why like the current Phineas and Ferb pickup, I think is pretty large.
That's like 40 episodes.
Yeah, which is great.
That's a pretty large one.
Yeah.
That's atypical right now. I think much more common is we're going to do 10 episodes and it's
especially a new show. A new show, it tends to be the 10 to see, does that pop? Does it punch through and get people?
I mean, it's just really hard now for the kind of animation that we did at Disney for that to kind of work anymore on Disney, on streaming. Cables really diminished. So, it's been through our career. First it was syndication, then it was cable, now it's streaming.
Yeah, and then recently it has now Kim Possible recently, like 5 years ago, they released their own live action film, which is
right.
Nice.
Yeah,
it's pretty cool.
But it's a different environment now for anyone doing kids stuff.
But I do think a lot of the decision making is a little bit fear driven, so that's why you see a lot of existing IP seems to come back and survive. I think aren't they revisiting like Sophia the First, which was a preschool show how many years ago?
Gosh,
Yeah,
Are they?
so.
I hadn't heard that one.
I think so.
Yeah.
I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure they are. I just think something connected, having something you can point to say, this was a success once, let's try it again.
Right.
It's very difficult, I think, to get something new and original out there to pop.
Yeah. So, moving on from Kim Possible, you also co-wrote the films Sky High and Hotel for Dogs. What went into writing those?
Well, I think
for cases where there was an existing script and they brought us in to come up with new ideas for it and rewrite. On Sky High, we definitely came in and said, let's make it like a John Hughes movie with superheroes. And Hotel for Dogs, I think we took it from being kind of a suburban story to being the more urban story that it ended.
Yeah, I think the original book was set in sort of a small town suburbia thing where an abandoned house is turned into the Hotel for Dogs. And, our pitch was, why not set it in a city where it is like an old hotel that becomes, so it's sort of bigger, and your title, the promise of your title is delivered a little more. I mean, Sky High was definitely writing the Kim live action movie that didn't happen, the one that became the drama. I think that executive at Walt Disney Pictures liked what we did and thought, we could bring something, especially because Kim had the high school humor balanced with action and, over the top adventure, which were definitely elements in Sky High. So,
yeah. Well, Bob,
It's
Bob,
nice to meet you all.
yes,
Yes,
Thank
you
you. Nice
too.
to meet you too.
yes.
Take care.
Thanks so much
Bye-bye.
again,
all right, Bob, have a good one.
Yes.
Take care.
Yeah. So, no, Sky High, Hotel for Dogs are wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I think
movies.
Sky High was definitely with both projects and with the little bit we've done in the sort of live action movie world. a script gets going, whether it's, based on source material like Hotel for Dogs was, or whether it's just a clever idea like Sky High was, it gets going, and often things get stuck in development because it's been sort of grinding, or everybody, you tend to have a lot of opinions. A lot of folks have their input, and it's just a question of how, and sometimes it's as simple as a fresh pair of eyes or a fresh voice. So after reading like Sky High, after reading the material, when we came into a meeting and started saying, here are the things we would do, and people are like, that sounds great, that makes a lot of sense. It's not that we're geniuses. Everybody wants it to succeed and wants it to move forward. It's a very hard thing to sort of explain to people, that everyone's would like to see it get out of whatever morass it's in. And everyone's quite experienced and smart. They're not, everyone knows what they're doing. It's just very hard. Sometimes multiple drafts have just gone down certain paths. But I think there was a clarity with Sky High that we had that, like in one meeting, I definitely pitched, and I know it was kind of connected because later someone else claimed that they said it, which is usually a good sign that you may have been on the right track when other people want to take credit. I said,
Yeah.
we need to map out the skeleton framework of the story, and it needs to work as like a John Hughes teen movie if there were no superheroes in it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you took away flying, you took away super strength, you took away plant powers, you took away all that, it should work, so that you should be able to do. There was a dad who was a big shot in high school. His son's insecure about, am I going to live up to that?
Right. Yeah.
There's a girl he has a crush on. There's a girl who has a crush on him, and he's best friend for years, and he's doesn't see her. Like all that stuff could work. I'm not saying it's a groundbreaking teen movie, but it would work as a teen movie. And then what makes it fun is to layer in, super strength, that the guy who's a jerk gym teacher who yells all the time has sonic powers, like when you take the basic stuff of a teen movie and then layer in the superhero, supervillain stuff, then you've got something, hopefully that's a fun, not parody, but, a little bit of a romp in that genre.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about a Hotel for
Exactly.
Dogs?
I think Hotel for Dogs was part of it was moving it to the city, made it a little more, I'm not going to say dangerous or whatever, but it certainly, the original book was a very sweet book about kids in a neighborhood, which was a very, it's not, it sounds unfair to say old fashioned, but there was a sweet smallness to it that would make for a good movie. But I think there was a feeling of, how do there's something about seeing stray dogs and cats in a city that just feels a little more dangerous. No matter what you do, it's a family movie. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it was hitting some of those beats of this brother and sister. What are they going through? We were on it. I would say we kind of, our rewrite work maybe jump started it after it was stuck a little bit in development hell. But then there were folks after us who brought in other elements. They're in the finished thing. But I think, that one, I think it was like, if you put it in a real hotel or an actual hotel that's abandoned, you've got this big location. I think the sort of Rube Goldberg feeding, playing ball, walking, like all that stuff, those were the sort of gimme things. Those are the things that, I guess it comes down to, what are the things you'd see in a trailer or a commercial that would make people say, oh, I want to, I want to see
Right.
that. That looks fun.
Yeah.
That's one I will say, given its time frame of, when it was out and all, we were a little shocked that one didn't get a direct-to-video sequel. It seemed like a kind of a natural.
Mhm.
We always thought it was in that era, where usually once a franchise got going, they'd keep it going in some sense. But
Right. Yeah.
we're
Right.
and every now and then we chat casually with the director of Sky High. We're still shocked that that was never revisited
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
for a sequel or spinoff, animated spinoff or live action spinoff. It always felt like it had, if not, big numbers that initial summer it was released, it felt like it lived on, with a sort of pretty passionate fan following that I always kind of thought there was more stories to tell there, but
Right. Yeah,
who knows?
Right.
exactly.
Exactly. That's kind of how the business goes, you know. So now are you also best known for creating the Nickelodeon series, The Penguins of Madagascar? How did that kind of came to be?
Well, Penguins was a really funny thing. Kim had that infamous fourth season of Kim that we talked about that we didn't expect, but we did. It came to a close. We
Mhm.
ended with graduation, uh, and it was done. Like this time, we felt like, okay, the series is really done. We got to go do something else. And we were leaving Disney. And creatively, between Bob and I, one of the things we kind of settled on was the Disney spin-offs of movies were fun to do, and it's great when characters are established. Um, but it's not quite the same as when you create your own show. When you create your own show, like with Kim and Ron, we created those characters. So when somebody says, "Well, would Kim do that?" We can say, "Yes, Kim would do that." As
Yeah.
the creators of Kim, we could tell you with great authority she would do that.
Yeah.
So we made this like solemn vow, which my one piece of career advice or life advice I would give anybody is never make a solemn vow. We made a solemn vow that we would only do a show that we created. And then before we even packed our Disney offices up to leave, we got a call from our manager who said, there's an opportunity to go over to Nickelodeon to work on the Penguins of Madagascar show, which of course was pre-existing characters spun off from a movie, everything we vowed we would
Madagascar,
not
yep.
ever do again.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we were like, boy, those are really funny characters.
Yeah.
So we took the meeting and we ignored our solemn vow or broke our solemn vow and instantly jumped on for a spin-off show from a popular movie franchise. Um, and we knew it was, sometimes with a spin-off, if you're not taking the lead characters, you're taking just some comic relief characters, that can be dicey. It can be, well, they were funny in small doses in that movie. Is there enough to do a series? But we felt as soon as we even heard they were thinking of it, we're like, there's enough with those guys. That's going to be. And what helped is as we developed the characters and got our voice cast set, it was one of the best voice casts that we've ever worked with on any show. I mean, I think we've always been very lucky, very blessed that we worked with great actors. But there was something about that ensemble and and they usually were all in the room together to play off each other. Because we would often have some of the actors double up to be other zoo animals. So we would create new characters.
Mhm.
So, Kevin Michael Richardson, who did Maurice, did a flamingo. He did, some other characters. John DiMaggio, who did Kowalski, or not Kowalski, Rico, um, I think did an elephant. He did, so everybody was doubling up. So in a way, they were one ensemble, but they were actually a much bigger ensemble at the same time. So we had a great time on that show, and it was, that's another one where I think the development had gone through its growing pains. where the folks at Nickelodeon wanted one thing, the folks at DreamWorks wanted other things. There were just a lot of opinions, and it was sort of stuck. And again, sometimes coming in just being fresh eyes and a fresh voice. People are, we were like with the pilot, we were like the guy we were collaborating with who had already been on it. We're like, there's just too much happening. If you guys simplify this pilot, you're trying to do too many things. If you just simplify it, let this one story be clear. These other things that you're concerned about, we can deal with them down the road, show by show by show. And everybody kind of relaxed enough to let the creative team make the show. And it worked out great. It won awards. Everybody working on it had a blast. And it was a huge, rating success.
And it ran for a while too, like 5-6 years or
quite a few
something
seasons.
like that.
Yeah. I'd say oddly, it was probably a bigger rating success than anything over the years we did at Disney. I don't know whether that, I'd like to think it's a function of the quality of the show, but there's always other issues too. Maybe that was a good peak for Nickelodeon too, with their whole slate of shows, live action and animation. But yeah, we had a blast on Penguins. Great actors, great writing staff, great storyboard artists, directors, great overseas animation studios. We visited them. Everybody got it. I think that's the thing we've learned over the years, that one of the biggest keys to success is when there's a shared vision from the people who are running the show to the people who are writing, storyboarding, directing, acting, animating. If everybody has a shared vision and gets it and is on board, you're going to get something great. Shows where there's some divisiveness or some division, where maybe the writers have one vision, but the directors have another, those are the shows that kind of fall apart. I think when you look back and you see a show like Batman the Animated Series that was so groundbreaking, as a viewer and an observer, I look at that and go, everybody was trying to accomplish the same goal. You know what I mean? Like there was a target that everybody agreed on. And I think shows sometimes that fall apart or that maybe creatively feel like a bit of a mess. Sometimes it's the fundamental idea at the core, but I think sometimes it's just not everybody was trying to accomplish the same thing. And that's not to say one person's right or wrong. It's just, you have to have that shared vision, that shared goal of what you're trying to accomplish. I think Penguins for us was a great example, and Kim was too, great example of everybody was on the same page. And the person we didn't mention at all yet was the composer, Adam Berry, who we've collaborated with for many years. We first met him and worked with him, I believe, on Hercules, and we've worked with him on Hercules, on Buzz, on Kim, on Penguins, on Monsters versus Aliens, also at Nick, and it's been great. Our collaboration with him, his talent always elevates our material.
Oh yeah,
nice,
absolutely. I mean, it's been a while since I last time watched the series, but I remember it was a great series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So speaking of movies and spin-offs, what was it like working on Big Hero 6 the series, and how did that come about?
It was one of those things we were called, as always seems to happen, called into a meeting or whatever, where they're like, hey, there's this movie coming out, which I think we had heard about. Because I was a Marvel Comics reader, so I knew of Big Hero 6, but I had never read the comic, but I had heard of it. So they're like, we're going to send you over to a screening over at Features. The movie was about done, I think. The only thing that wasn't done yet, oddly, was the little after credits sequence with Stan Lee.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
I think that wasn't done yet. I mean, because I think he only appeared as the picture the family portrait in Fred's mansion, I think. So we saw the movie and we're like, this would be a great show. This will be a fun, balance of action comedy. And we had the idea that, well, let's do it that Fred's I don't know if we hit exactly on father or if we thought grandfather. But anyway, we said we should do it that there's an actual sort of bat cave that Fred had, his father was formerly a superhero, whatever. And then they did that reveal when we saw the movie in the theaters, did that reveal that Stan Lee's character was, a superhero as well, whatever, which we kind of expanded on that legacy, that he was sort of a 1970s era superhero. But yeah, we had a lot of fun with Big Hero. It was great. We got most of the movie cast back. I think Ari Payton, who's a terrific actor, came in for us for Wasabi, but I think everybody else was from the movie, and they were great. And it's just another, when you have really talented actors, it really helps the writing team and the storyboard team and the directors. It just helps everybody because it just elevates everybody's work.
Right, yeah.
And we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun translating it. I think between that and Buzz Lightyear, there is, and I don't know what the answer is. I guess the answer is there is no answer. When you take something that people fell in love with as a CG property, translating it to 2D is challenging. And I don't know if sometimes making that change, if it leaves some people behind, like if some people they fell in love with those characters in a certain, I was talking to Bob about this not too long ago, where I said, in a certain era, in the 1980s or 90s, there would be an animated Saturday morning show with the Minions,
Right, yeah.
But
Right,
now
yeah,
in this current marketplace, they can sustain their own movie.
Yeah.
So it's just tough. It's like, and I know like Hotel Transylvania, they did a 2D version,
Yeah.
which seemed to have the pace and execution and vibe of the movie, but I don't think it connected with audiences quite the same way. Maybe it did, and I'm just not aware of it. I don't know. But yeah, so that to me is the challenge, is like, if you could have done a Big Hero 6 movie in CG that had those ambitious visuals, that would probably hit differently. Like the folks that they were well, we did Big Hero just down the hall. There was the crew doing Tangled, which was terrifically, just a great designed show, beautiful, well executed, ambitious story ideas. I don't know. People fell in love with that movie as a CG movie, and I don't know.
Right.
It's one of those things I'm as sort of baffled as anybody with on that topic of, does it lose something? I mean, I don't think creatively it necessarily does, but does it lose something for the audience in terms of the property they fell in love with?
Yeah.
The kids, like when I think of my grandkids who love Encanto or Moana, they love it as the movie they saw. If somebody pretty radically reinterpreted it, I don't know if it would hit the same.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows?
Right.
So, as we're getting close to wrapping up, can you share any projects you're currently working on, at least that you're allowed to talk about?
Well, we are semi-retired in terms of there's just not a ton of stuff happening right now in general in the business. Right now, there's a little bit of a kind of a slowdown of development and production. And I think part of that is the adjustment to streaming of like how many shows do they need? How many shows do they want? our joke about please by all means keep watching Kim on Disney Plus. I think we'd love to have one last roundup with the Kim characters. I think if it got the right Disney Plus numbers, that's a possibility. That maybe there'd be a way to revisit Kim, Ron, and the gang. But otherwise, right now we're sort of, taking it a little bit easy.
Right. Yeah.
Which
So,
I know is not a very exciting answer. But,
I mean, you guys have worked on so many shows over the
Yeah.
course of, several decades, Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But I creatively, you always want to keep making stuff, and you always want to keep being challenged. Right now, in terms of getting that call of, oh, here's Project X, are you interested? Nothing has come up that tickles us there. And in terms of coming up with something original that we can sell, nothing has come up there. But we never rule anything out. We always feel like there's always more stories to tell, whether it's with characters that exist or new characters to create. There's always more to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and looking forward whenever that's coming up down the road for you both.
Yeah. So this last question that Jake's about to ask is a question we ask all of our guests at the end. Go ahead, Jake.
Thank you, Chris. So, of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? Or in your own words, how would you define the word nostalgia?
Well, I think of nostalgia as comfort.
Right.
You know what I mean? To
Absolutely.
me,
Yep.
Oh, yes.
and where I go back to it, when I sit down on a given morning and have a bowl of Captain Crunch with crunch berries, and I have to do the crunch.
Yes.
I have to do the crunch berries because I need some fruit.
Yeah.
I have to be healthy.
Yeah.
When I have Captain Crunch with crunch berries, and I sit there reading the back of the cereal box, doing whatever maze or matching game is on there.
Yeah.
I sit there and go, wow, this was me however many decades ago doing this exact same thing. And I'll do it with certain cereals. Frosted Flakes qualifies. And my dream would be to have where some people have a wine cellar. I would love to have a cellar that is just full of breakfast cereals. Because that magic, if I could go back and get a vintage, if I could get a vintage Fruit Brute, and I don't want the special one that just comes out now around Halloween. I'd love to find give me a vintage classic Captain Crunch, even sans berries. No, you know what I mean? To me, it is there, and I guess maybe that's why I went into children's entertainment, that there was something magical about those Saturday mornings. There was something magical about whatever evening in December I could watch Rudolph and Herbie and Yukon Cornelius. You know what I mean? It just, there was a sweet spot of time. And I find I'm not all that nostalgic for other periods of life the way some folks are. I'm not as nostalgic about, say, a particular concert from 1985 or something, as I am about a bowl of Captain Crunch with crunch berries or such.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great words to end on.
I guess I have a junk appetite.
Yeah.
No worries at all.
Yeah.
It was nice meeting you guys.
Nice meeting you too, Mark.
Hope you got something usable
you too.
out of all this. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
Of course.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your day, Mark.
All right. You too, guys. Have a good one.
Thank you for taking the time to do this. Thanks again, Mark.
Sure.
Take care.
It's a pleasure. Great questions. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Bye.
All right.
so
Have a
much,
good
Mark.
one.
You too. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, Mark.
Bye.
Bye.
And it's goodbye from us as well. We absolutely enjoyed our time speaking with the wonderful Bob Schooley and Mark McCorkle. Keep on the lookout for more wonderful interviews coming your way. And as always, what do we say, Jake? Take us home.
Keep nostalgia alive. Take care, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode. Be sure to follow Jake and the Happy Nostalgia team on social media, check out our website, and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.